So welcome to the third and final hour of the show. Our time now is 9 minutes after 2 o'clock. We're looking at this issue around really the halting and the changes that came with the new administration of Donald Trump. There's since been a lot that one would see play itself out. But this morning we're looking at a Pride Month and looking at the implications then to those that are members of the LGBTQI plus community, but gay men in particular, on the continent that are navigating this issue. So there are cases that are already playing themselves out, and Eden is joining us. Eden Harris is an award-winning U.S. Africa journalist who's coming to tell us about these cases that have been mounted against U.S. President Donald Trump, and how then we see lessons being learned here, looking at some of the interactions that Eden has heard with those that are affected here. And you at home, you're welcome to form part of this conversation on 0861 987 000. And there by X, we go by at PowerFM 987 at Katlego Legodi _ Eden, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Really appreciated. Let's just go into it. It does look like there are now implications that are starting to play themselves out, looking at what we saw, these changes to the approaches in funding. We saw PEPFAR being halted, and now we see those that are members of the LGBTQI plus saying that they are feeling the brunt of what came with these changes.
Yeah, I've been reporting on HIV funding in Africa and the LGBTQ plus community, among other things, since 2023. And my reporting has shown that this community is marginalized and often left behind. And that includes funding for PrEP, which is also known for pre-exposure prophylaxis, and hence the newfound cases of HIV that have been reported in Nigeria, also in South Africa. People are truly feeling the brunt of the rollback in U.S. aid.
So just maybe give us a sense of, how it all maybe started. Was it just a matter of an automatic halt that saw maybe some of these facilities not having reserves to try and accommodate and maybe help them adjust to the new order? Or was it something that was so much of a shock that we see people saying that it has come through with implications that are now starting to affect our health?
Yeah, as your listeners may know, hours after President Donald Trump took office in January of this year, he froze aid, like foreign assistance, and that sent shockwaves through the world. And freezing PEPFAR is a critical program that has been funded for over 20 years. It started in 2003 under Republican George W. Bush when he introduced it to Congress, and he wanted to find a way to be a leader on the global stage. So when President Trump came into office in 2025 and he halted that critical aid, people were surprised. People were just like, yeah, there may need to be areas where aid should be pulled back due to corruption, or there may need to be a reevaluation, but to take away that critical aid, that life-saving aid, it's something that world leaders just doesn't agree with. And at the end of January, the Trump administration actually agreed to restore that aid, but only for people who are pregnant and could potentially pass on anything to their child. Earlier, I said that the LGBTQ plus community is often left behind, and they were left behind in getting that healthcare that helps keep them safe. There are people who have been known to show up to clinics and request PrEP or request any like assistance, and they're basically being turned away, and they're being exposed to HIV. As I mentioned earlier, there was a guy, his name is Emmanuel. I will only refer to him by that name. He tested positive 2 months after Trump took office, and he blames the administration because, as he says, it was a shock, and he expresses that, yes, it's his duty to take care of himself, but if he's used to getting aid and it just abruptly stops, that affects him and the people around him.
It does. And I was going to go there as well to say, just maybe give us a sense of the cases that you're coming through here that would give as a sense of the impact of what is happening on the ground? I know that there are various people that you've interviewed. What are they saying here? And do you see them saying that their compromised health would be as a result of the halting of this, funding, the halting and the changes that came through with these executive orders? What are the stories that they're telling you and how they've been affected by this?
Yeah, well, I spoke to a transgender youth here in the US today,
Mm.
actually, and they basically said that, well, I asked them if they thought that Trump freezing the aid to Africa was intentional, and she said basically she doesn't think it's intentional, like targeting the LGBTQ um, um, people, but she thinks it's intentional as a whole for people who don't share the same ideology as the president and current Republicans who are sycophants to the president. She believes that if they don't share the same mindset or carry the same beliefs, they're not under the care of the president. So that was a overall sentiment that was shared with me today.
Let's go to that audio. Let's just get a sense of this interview. And I want you to also maybe go at length to give us Emmanuel's story, because I'm worried about Emmanuel now. In terms of how then Emmanuel would find his health compromised, looking at these. It does also give us somewhat of flavor, because Emmanuel would be from here, Africa, from Nigeria, but the transgender lady that you interviewed would be in the United States. So it will be interesting to just juxtapose it to see how then both of these two are really experiencing the impact on their end. Let's go to that audio that you've sent us in terms of this interview. We'll come back, reflect some more, and then go into Emmanuel's story and try just get a sense of how Emmanuel then gets caught up in all of these issues that are playing themselves out.
I truly do feel
Yeah,
that it
Emmanuel
was
is a
intentional. I
25-year-old
feel
gay
like
man
it's
who
not,
is in
it's
Nigeria, tested
not
positive 2 months
intentional
ago,
based on,
and he is
LGBTQ
used to
plus and
getting
gay and
PrEP,
trans alone.
and
I
that PrEP
feel that that
basically
plays
provides
a
him
stronger part
life-saving. I
because
mean,
he
it
doesn't
like it was
believe
providing him
that people should be
life-saving
gay or
care
people should be allowed to be trans.
to be able to fend off any viruses that would come. And since he isn't getting that support, he finds himself with a positive diagnosis, and of course that affects him emotionally.
If I
And
can come in there a bit, Eden, and to backtrack a bit, because we were playing that audio that you sent us of the interview that you had with the transgender when you were when you went into the story of Emmanuel. Maybe let's park Emmanuel for now. Play the audio, reflect on this interview that you had with the transgender. We'll come back and go into Emmanuel's story, because I'm interested in actually seeing how Emmanuel then is navigating this one. But I wanted us to just juxtapose the two in terms of the the American view through the transgender that you interviewed, and then we'll come back and just get a sense of how Emmanuel then is navigating this one, looking at the fact that he's even tested positive from all of these issues. Let's play that audio. We'll come back and reflect.
I truly do feel that it was intentional. I feel like it's not intentional based on, LGBTQ plus and gay and trans alone. I feel that that plays a stronger part because he doesn't believe that people should be gay or people should be allowed to be trans or people should be allowed to be who they want to be. He believes that people should be who he sets them to be or what they were set in born to be. He doesn't believe in people being able to help him or people just being themselves. He doesn't believe in people being around if it isn't benefiting him and his party.
Yeah, it doesn't look like our friend here is impressed with Donald Trump and his stance and how then he's moved over time, and you hear that it does look like it's somewhat also borders on a personality of Donald Trump and nothing to then do with the politics of the day. What do you make of that? How do we actually find the issues then playing themselves out? Do we see these sentiment being one that is isolated, or there are others that really would believe that indeed then this would be the character of Donald Trump, away even from the policies and the likes?
Yeah, I would agree. There aren't many people globally who support Trump, and it is not an isolated view.
Mm.
It's a view that many people share when it comes to the policy decisions that he's making, the direction that he's heading with, even with national security. Folks are quite frankly flabbergasted at the decisions he's making. Healthcare is a paramount topic, and it's a issue that usually isn't bipartisan. It's something that usually gets supports from Democrats and also Republicans. So, like when you see the president not fully restoring that critical PEPFAR funding to areas that truly need it, it leaves folks surprised and wondering, and quite frankly scratching their head on like, what is he doing? And like that's what my reporting has shown, and that's just the sentiment that I hear and also see when you look at news and you see folks protesting against the president of the United States, and they're calling him a king when America is based on democratic principles.
Did you get a sense that since all of these changes started playing themselves out, there's a sense of a tense atmosphere, that members of the LGBTQI plus would find themselves more vulnerable in these, political climate, this new administration, than they were and they would have been in the past? And does this then actually, more or less in any way become somewhat of a different view, a new view from Donald Trump, or this is what he's been bargaining on as he was on the campaign trail, looking at making America great again? Because I think at some point, I'm not sure if it was Michelle Obama during the race, the presidential race, who was talking about some of the implications that would come through Donald Trump's tenure. Do you see this then starting to play itself out, or this was just an opportunity that played itself out in terms of the executive orders? He looked into the monies and said that no, this has to go, or it is on script with how then he was looking at enforcing some of these changes in making America great again.
Well, that was a loaded question, but I would try to answer it. But the LGBTQ plus community is feeling isolated, and there is tension in the federal government, and it's definitely tension in this community as it relates to them finding safe places to work, because the Supreme Court ruled in favor of President Trump's executive order, basically doing away with transgender troops in the military, so they can no longer serve. So folks are feeling isolated. I've actually done some reporting on a new app called Fam Connect, which allows that community to find jobs and like have a community where people feel safe and they don't feel like they will be threatened or like shamed for being who they truly are. The impact and as it relates to his agenda, some of the stuff was like forecasted with the Project 25 agenda, which was a long document which outlaid the current American First agenda, which basically said that they would roll back DEI, they will tackle education and tackle certain LGBTQ plus issues. So the stuff was pretty much predicted. What people are surprised about is his execution this time around, because the first time he was inexperienced, but now that he knows, well, he has a little bit more knowledge on how the federal government works, he's able to execute. And because he's coming back with the axe to grind, He has a lot of people who are under his control and who don't want to say no to him. Like, if you don't have complete loyalty to President Donald Trump, it will not play out good for you. So he has a lot of folks in his cabinet who are really loyal and who are willing to play out his agenda at whatever cost, even if it's the cost of lives through rolling back PEPFAR in its full capacity, or even if it's making national security decisions that the global community does not agree with.
I'm worried about Emmanuel. I'm worried about Ichizona as well, looking at how then, they would be affected by this and the recourse that would be available for them, looking at how now this becomes their new reality. How are they faring? Let's get a sense of how they are faring here, because you gave us a little hint then of how Emmanuel was affected by these and is now HIV positive. There is also Ichizona. How are they doing?
So Emmanuel is just like other trans individuals. The only difference is the continent and the conditions that they're facing. Like, their feelings are the same. The feelings of feeling left behind, the feelings of not feeling like someone is there to support them and give them access to that healthcare. It's a feeling that many people would not want to experience if they have been relying on medicine and all of a sudden it just abruptly stops. That's something that no one would wish on anyone. So that's what I'm seeing, and that it's like the sentiment across the board in the US and also in Africa.
It's just a concern. So what becomes the recourse in this case? You had said earlier on as well that we saw him at some point bring about restoration for mothers, those that are giving birth and the likes, in terms of how they move. At some point we saw also the pause, right, the 90-day pause, and people were looking at those at least coming through to create somewhat of a buffer, a relief, come through with a relief here. So that has not helped. People like Ichizona and Emmanuel here. What becomes somewhat of their recourse, and the 90-day pause? Do we see it affecting or coming through then for people that may have been dependent on some of these aid?
Well, no one knows what's truly going to happen next with the Trump administration and if they're going to fully restore the program. So we're all waiting to see what comes down the road. So honestly, I can't tell you what I don't know on this topic.
So the recourse, does Emmanuel and Ichizona, do they have a recourse? Can they approach the courts to say that are they mounting a class action, somewhat of a lawsuit against the Trump administration? Do we know how then they are likely to really fare here? Because this then becomes their live or long-term, lifetime reality that they now are HIV positive.
Yeah, I honestly think there isn't a case because I feel like legal experts would argue like you are responsible for your health, and some people may argue that this was a program that they were dependent on. But I feel like that would be a hard case to argue. I feel like the recourse for Emmanuel and others would be to become an advocate, to stand up for people and to raise awareness on the importance of safe sex. But I do want to speak to how this aid freeze affects African countries.
Yeah.
And currently right now there is supplies that is stuck in a warehouse in Belgium and in Dubai, and the US no longer wants to donate the condoms or even pay for it to leave the port, and that's according to reporting. Currently right now there are more than 8,000 healthcare workers in South Africa that have lost their jobs due to the funding cut, and there are people who are just relying on that critical healthcare. So that recourse could be for him to become an activist and to speak out and just tell his story, because storytelling is really powerful.
Yeah, I'm hoping, I'm rooting for Emmanuel here, but also at the same time, I'm hoping that there is a change of heart that would come through because there are lives that would be on the line here. Do you, perhaps in the work that you do, Eden, do you get a sense that this may be even bigger than, these stories that we get from Emmanuel, that there are people that may have even lost their lives from these, looking at the implications, because these then would be life-threatening diseases, life-threatening viruses that people are navigating on the daily. Do you get a sense that maybe probably we may be downplaying this, but at a larger scale, the impact becomes bigger?
I think what the impact would be more is like lives lost and the U.S. misunderstanding that containing HIV globally is a national security priority. Because we have people who travel to and from Africa, we have people who travel to and from Europe, and the virus is pretty much everywhere. So when the U.S. is like pretty much able to like recognize that putting that funding back is it's best for the world, that will be a good place to like put the world in when it comes to safety and assurance.
Awesome. Eden, I want us to leave it here for this morning. We really appreciate you coming through and giving us a sense of the work that you've been doing over time. And I'm hoping that it does then lead to opening eyes. It does then lead to change in policy and direction, that it comes through also to give a sense of hope to those that may find themselves navigating these uncertain times, to say you're not alone. There are a lot of people that are also moving in a similar manner. But really appreciate you coming through and giving us your time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. Eden Harris coming through, joining us from the United States of America this morning, is an award-winning U.S. Africa journalist, looking at how then we see Africa faring, looking at the pauses of the AIDS, PEPFAR. We saw PEPFAR or halted, and how then this is affecting a lot of those that are vulnerable here or find themselves vulnerable here, members of the LGBTQI plus community being the ones that we see Eden having interviewed here earlier on. Even played you audio, an interview with a transgender who was just giving us a sense of how they are being affected and their observation of all of these developments playing themselves out in the United States of America. I want us to break a bit. When we come back, we'll close the show off with Tato Mafokane. Tato is coming through this morning to really help us look at youth and community development. We'll be putting under the spotlight this morning the Mamelodi initiative.
Shilumana Group.